Congress is kind of getting the short end of the stick here.
I would say so. I mean, listen, this is really also just an observation about how in the past 48 hours, things have been really not trending in Republicans' direction.
Morning, I'm Anna Palmer.
And I'm Jake Sherman.
And welcome to the Daily Punch, brought to you by Punchbowl News. It's Thursday, November 6th, 2025. Let's get into the mix. Here are your Washington headlines of the day. Number one, Republicans deal with a distracted President Donald Trump. Number two, the latest on the government shutdown. And number three, what Virginia and New Jersey tell us about 2026. All right, Jake, let's get into it. A really interesting top in this morning's newsletter focused on how the political winds are whipping the MAGA movement, but in particular, just kind of looking at how President Donald Trump post passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act has been not very focused here in Washington and has been much more focused abroad, doing international deals, focused on remodeling the White House, so many other things. But Congress is kind of getting the short end of the stick here.
I would say so. I mean, listen, this is really also just an observation about how in the past 48 hours, things have been really not trending in Republicans' direction. And this is a really in the moment. Anything could change, of course. The shutdown could end, but let me give some examples here. So on Wednesday, this is just kind of the scene setter here. On Wednesday, Trump said, blow up the filibuster this afternoon.
Right.
Trump contradicted Republican leaders, saying the shutdown had been worse for Republicans than Democrats. Then the president jetted off to Miami for a speech, and Senate Republicans ignored him. The election, Trump was in one place, Republicans were in another. I mean, Speaker Mike Johnson wouldn't take any responsibility, said the election is no reflection on Republicans. But this was not a good election for Republicans in any way, shape, or form. 59% of independents voted for Spanberger, Abigail Spanberger, that is, in Virginia. The entire state of Virginia is trending away from Republicans. In New Jersey, Democrats flipped key Hispanic counties. And on the Hill, some people say it should be a wake-up call. There's a huge chasm between Donald Trump and the Hill on the shutdown. Trump has said this has been worse for us than Democrats, and they still need to get a deal here. Trump's tariff regime is at the risk of collapsing. Supreme Court justices seem skeptical of the government's argument, rather, that the IEEPA gives the administration broad authority to levy tariffs. So his tariff regime could fall. So listen, the dynamics of politics moves quickly, I would say. But just right now, things do not seem that great for Republicans as the government is enmeshed in this massive shutdown that has not unlocked quite yet. We'll talk a little bit more about the shutdown after the break, but do you have any observations for us, Anna?
Yeah, I think it's an important listen. I think you look and you just listed, several different areas, right? But what is so, I think, important when it comes to Trump's leadership here in Washington is Republicans in Congress have basically taken all their cues from this administration, right? Their leadership. If Trump wants it, Trump gets it. I mean, has been kind of the stamp of this Congress for Republicans. And right now, you're seeing kind of Trump either distracted or focused on other issues, and they're important. I'm not discounting, what's happening in the Middle East, in Gaza, what's happening with his Asia trip, and all kinds of things. But I think it feels as though Republicans are a little adrift here. And I think, where you've had congressional leadership try to really shore Republicans up time and time again, say we're united, say that this shutdown's worse for Democrats than it is Republicans, and you have Trump saying basically the opposite. It's stunning.
There's a benefit to being in the White House, right, and not on the Hill. And this is something that Mike Johnson's really, really frustrated by. And I talked to him about this yesterday. He thinks, Democrats, of course, did instigate this shutdown. There's no doubt about that. That's not a controversial point here. They wanted to try to use this to extract concessions on the Obamacare subsidy issue.
Yeah.
But in a lot of polls right now, Republicans are getting blamed. Why are Republicans getting blamed? Like, it's easy to say, it's media biased. The media is not, punishing Democrats enough for the shutdown. But the reality is people understand, this is my analysis, people understand that Republicans are in control of government. So it's difficult for people to then say, well, then Democrats are responsible for the shutdown. Mike Johnson says every day, we need 60 votes, so we need 7 of them to vote with us. to end the shutdown. That is all true, Anna, of course. But that is why I think Republicans are getting blamed. Don't you think so? I mean, people just understand that Republicans are in charge of
Yeah.
government.
All right, Jake, let's move on to the number 2 story of the morning in the Senate. Senate Democrats spent Wednesday touting their big election day wins and President Donald Trump's reaction. Today, however, is going to be a massive day on Capitol Hill. We're going to find out whether their wins on Tuesday will derail bipartisan talks to end the 37-day-long government shutdown. Democratic senators are scheduled to hold a special caucus meeting later today that senators and aides believe will determine whether enough Democrats will back an emerging deal to reopen the government and vote on a bill extending the expiring Obamacare subsidies. We've talked about how there seemed like there's been more momentum, more Democrats kind of coalescing around the deal that it's time to move forward. But does Tuesday change things for them?
Yeah, well, we should also mention we have Chris Murphy, senator from Connecticut, Democrat from Connecticut, on flyout day today. That will tape this morning, and we're going to talk to him about a whole host of issues on the shutdown, on just the general state of Democratic politics, especially on Capitol Hill. The deal, obviously, that Democrats are thinking about, are considering, is a deal that would open the government with a CR that opens the government probably until January and includes a 3-bill minibus, a minibus to fund 3, not necessarily 3 agencies, but would be 3 bills through 2026 on 3 different, it's probably Ledge Branch Ag and Milcon VA. So those are 3 relatively uncontroversial bills. But these are bills coming out of the Senate, so we'll have to see. I think this is going to be a huge problem for the House. And then also this Senate deal would also guarantee a vote on Obamacare subsidies. Now, Mike Johnson's not going to guarantee that vote. He's just not. I mean, I can't imagine a scenario in which Mike Johnson says this will get a vote in the House because he does not agree with the subsidies.
Right, but the Senate isn't saying the House is going to agree to a vote on it. It's saying the Senate is going to agree to it.
But Bernie Sanders said yesterday, why would we agree to something like this if the speaker's not saying that we will put it on the floor in the House and the president's not going to sign it? He thinks it's giving away the store for no reason. And by the way, it would probably pass the House. It probably would. And the speaker's just not going to guarantee this vote. So that'll be a problem with a lot of Senate Democrats. But the reality is people just want to get out of the shutdown. That's the reality. People want out of the shutdown, and you don't need the entire Senate Democratic caucus to agree. You need a handful of people to agree. But there will be voices in that room of people saying, this is a bad deal. We should not do it. We just won this election Tuesday night in a resounding fashion. People are rewarding us for fighting. They're rewarding us for standing up to Trump. They're rewarding us for fighting for healthcare, and we shouldn't do this. So that's going to be the tension in this room, which I imagine will be a very long lunch and a very long conversation.
All right. We will be covering all of it going into today. So it's going to be very interesting. Let's move on to the number 3 story of the morning, election post game, what Virginia and New Jersey tells us about 2026. Some interesting numbers to look at. And Ali Mutnick goes deep here on these. And I think, obviously we've talked, and there's been a lot talked about the turn of Hispanic voters in New Jersey, but Jake, I think the really interesting point here on my end is where she goes kind of deep in Virginia on how Democrats were able to gain a majority, grew their majority in the Virginia House of Delegates. Democrats are on track to flip 13 districts, but she talks about kind of the numbers and where Democrats were able to make gains was really in Harris won districts, as well as Trump won districts, but by 5 or less points. And the ones that he really resoundingly, kind of won, Democrats weren't able to make the inroads there. And that could have a really big implication in terms of the power and control of the House.
The point Allie's making is this is not wavy. This is not a wave. This was not a wave election in the Virginia House of Delegates. Democrats not flipping any seats that Trump won by more than 5 points means that basically, and I asked Allie this yesterday in the gallery when we were thinking about this story, is this just Virginia reverting to the mean? Right? Is this just Virginia voting its natural tendencies? And it's probably a little bit more than that, right? Because they did flip 5 seats that Trump carried between 1 and 5 points. So, that does tell you that it's a it was a good night, obviously, for Democrats, but they didn't flip any seats that Trump won by more than 5 points, which, if you extrapolate this to like a 2010 type scenario in the House of Representatives and in Congress, Republicans rather flipped a lot of seats that were more than D plus 5. So anyway, it's a very interesting item.
And an interesting moment in time. And how did Democrats and what do Republicans take from that?
Yeah, well, Anna, you and I talk about this all the time. People take the wrong message from elections all the time, and that's no change here. But agree with you. It's interesting to extrapolate this out a little bit.
All right, we're going to leave you there. Thanks so much for listening. We appreciate. If you like the Daily Punch, share it on social media. Tell your friends and family. It's the best way for folks to find out about us. And of course, you can go deeper on all these issues and more. We had a lot more in the newsletter we did not get to today from our tech policy reporters and some big key job moves. Go to punchbowl.news and check that all out. Have a great day and stay safe, everybody.